Hi, I'm Peter Haas, the founder of MacroWad, and welcome to the first episode of Ask MacroWad. So this is going to be a weekly roundup show. I've got a Facebook group called Master Your Macros, Ask MacroWad. It's on Facebook. And in that, I've been doing Q&A, short answer Q&A, where people ask questions, and I provide short answers via text. If you'd like to ask a question, you can go, it's a free group, just jump into it and start asking questions. What I'm going to start doing though every week is doing a roundup of previous questions that I answered during the week and going on and expounding on those answers. So short form via text, and then I'm going to go ahead and answer more in depth with the video. And I'm going to do it via Facebook Live into the group, so that'll be live, so you can tune into that and you can ask questions off of this, off of the answers that I cover. If you have a brand new question, though, I'd actually prefer you to dump it in the group so I can go ahead and cover that more in detail. But if you want to riff off one of my answers and get a little more clarification, that's fine. What I'll be doing, though, is I'll be taking these. I'm actually shooting on a separate camera, and I will be dumping this into YouTube also. I'm also going to be providing some links as supplements with this. So this is going to be an evolving concept. I'm going to try to weave together information and some other multimedia stuff. But then I'll also actually be taking this and transcripting it out and doing a post on my website, on the macrowad.com website. So you'll be seeing this in a couple different places, in a couple different areas. So excited to get going with this, excited to start answering questions. I do really well in Q&A format type scenarios, so we'll go with this. Okay. All right. First question for Ask MacroWad episode 1 is from Beth, and earlier on in the week she asked, does it matter when I get my macros, or just as long as I hit my numbers? So the fundamental answer to that, there's a couple tiers on this, so I'll approach it from the simplest way first. So it does not matter when you get your macros, and the most important thing is hitting your macro targets each and every single day. Okay, so if you're doing 100 protein, hitting 100 protein, 75 carbs, 75 carbs, 50 fat, hitting 50 fat, just hitting each numbers every single day. The tolerances that I use are plus minus 5 grams on protein and carbs, and then plus minus 2 grams on fat. So those are the tolerances I look for. And if you want to, you can break that up. You can do meat meals where it's broken up. You can do one big meal if you want, or if you want to eat all of your macros all in one day, that's fine. You could do 18 meals and break it up. You could do it where it's an all protein meal, an all carb meal, or an all fat meal. Or you could evenly balance them so they're the same numbers or the same proportions. So the number one thing is hitting total macros, because that will also allow you to hit total calories, which will control your total intake for the day. So that is the number one thing, okay, is hit your macros. That being said, more advanced tactics involve spacing them out. The most important reason that I tell people to space your feedings out evenly into 4, 5, maybe 6 feedings is really just to cut down on hunger, especially when you're on a cut. So if you're eating one big meal, you're going to be getting pretty hungry at some point in time between that meal. If you're spacing them out, every 2, 3, 4, every 3 or 4 hours, then you should be able to go without getting super hungry during the day. The other reason is to also just kind of drip nutrients to your muscles and to the rest of your body. You eat a certain amount of protein and that gets digested and that goes to your muscles. But then if you take a very, very long time to eat protein again, your protein, the free amino acids that are available to your muscles fall, so that can put you in catabolism or decrease your recovery. So that is another minor consideration in relation to the major considerations of just hitting your total numbers period. And I say that because if you're only getting half of your protein or a third of your protein for the day, it doesn't matter if you're evenly spacing it out, you're going to be low, and that's going to be way worse. So I think about it in terms of prioritizing. So number one, hitting your macros for the day, and then evenly spacing them out, throughout the day to help cut down on hunger. So I hope that helps. All right, great. So next question, question number 2, is from Tamara. And Tamara asks, should I start taking creatine on a cut? Will that matter? So I don't recommend starting to take creatine at the same time you start taking a cut. The reason being is that when you take creatine, you'll start absorbing it into your muscle cells, and your muscle cells will eventually start reaching a saturation point on it. I'm assuming you're familiar with creatine and the benefits of creatine in terms of explosive strength and mass gain and muscle building. So that being said, part of the way that it works is when creatine goes in your muscles, it actually takes water with it. So you will actually gain weight. Okay, that is part of the hypertrophy effect is actually so it's not bloat. It's not the same as like extracellular or blood volume going up or retaining water. It's not the same thing. The water is actually going into your muscle cells, so your muscle cells are actually bigger and fuller. So, but you will gain weight. You will gain weight when you start taking creatine. And that if you start a cut right then, most people don't want to see the scale going up the day after they start a cut. It's really demoralizing. So what I would really recommend doing is so I'm a fan of, before you start a cut, if you're new to macros, is you take a 2-week baseline. As part of my methodology, I just call it an on-ramp phase. And I actually recommend, if you're going to be taking creatine, you start at the beginning of those 2 weeks taking creatine. That way you go ahead and account for creatine, and by the time you finish your baseline, that will be your new normal weight. You should be staying weight stable starting this baseline phase, for the duration of this baseline phase. So yes, creatine will make you gain weight. It should make you gain weight. That's the way it works. Okay, so I would not take it on a cut. If you want to take it, started taking a mass, that's great. It's if anything, yay, I gained 3 to 5 pounds, as soon as I started my mass. So I would more recommend it starting it during the maintenance phase, so you can really establish what normal is for you. Okay. All right. So the next question that I have is from Michael. And it is, what do you recommend as the easiest way to count macros throughout the day? Is there an accurate eyeball method? Okay. So the answer is, so I'm going to go, that's a 2-part question, and I'll cover the first one. So what do I recommend is the easiest way to count macros throughout the day? MyFitnessPal. That's the app I use. That's the app I tell all of my athletes to use. I've used a lot of different kinds of apps. I know people are going to disagree with me. That's fine. But it's the easiest one that I've found. I really like the premium version. There is a free version available, and I really recommend it just because it's got the biggest database out of any app that I've seen or used. It's also the easiest to get into and start using very quickly. The setup's pretty straight. The baseline setup is pretty straightforward. I give my clients, my athletes, some additional directions for setup so they can totally customize it, and especially in the context of CrossFit, they can use MyFitnessPal that much easier. For example, I tell everybody to turn off calorie tracking for exercise. It just screws up all of your macro equations, okay? Like there's a stock MFP is okay, but I tell people how to optimize it to get better results out of it as a tool in a CrossFit context. And I mean, that's what I do. I optimize macros in a CrossFit context. So MFP MyFitnessPal is just a tool to help you run your macros. Now, the second question off that, is there an accurate eyeball method for tracking macros? The answer is no. Okay, and there's a really big reason for that. So I will eyeball portions. You need to know how to do that though. Like I have, like, a fist is 1 cup. Okay, like an inch is like this part of your thumb. So I've got little tricks that I can use to eyeball portion sizes. But if you've never done that before, then you have no idea. If you've never used measuring cups or spoons or weighed things or taking, food measurements, then that's going to be really hard for you. It's going to be almost impossible for you to accurately track that way. Secondarily, nobody really knows like grams of protein, fat, and carbs of each and individual food until they weigh and measure and plug in those foods. Like nobody has any real concept of portion size. And people just don't really have a accurate estimate on their actual intake during the day. And I say that, and I'll post a follow-up link to that. People are really bad at self-reporting both their food intake and their actual exercise levels. And I mean actually how many calories you burn. So I'll provide two examples of that. So there are food studies, scientific studies where they do, and they have people self-report their intake. So one, people lie. People just aren't honest with how much food they actually intake. The broad pattern is everybody underestimates the amount of food that they're intaking. You think you're taking in 2,000, you're probably taking in 2,500 or 3,000. I've seen some studies where it's even way more skewed, where they said they were taking in 1,200 calories, and it was closer to 3,000. Okay. On the flip side, people overestimate how much and calories they're burning from a particular activity. Nobody's right. Even in CrossFit land, like the number of calories that you burn in CrossFit, for a CrossFit class, for a 1-hour CrossFit class, isn't actually that high because you're not actually moving that entire time. So everybody thinks that they're burning a ton of calories in a CrossFit workout class. You are burning a lot more calories per minute in a WOD or during lifting than you would compared to cardio. But if you're doing 60 minutes of straight cardio, you will burn more total calories than a CrossFit class that's doing like, a lift and maybe a 15-minute Metcon, just because you're not moving the whole time. Maybe doing a warm-up, but you're just not moving the whole time, okay? And in general, I don't really think about exercise as burning calories in terms of burning fat. I think about exercise in terms of building muscle and building capacity. I use manipulating food and calorie intake to burn fat, because you've got all these, 1-hour class versus 23 hours of calorie manipulation. I mean, the clear winner is manipulating your intake for fat loss, okay, and doing exercise for all, CrossFit and exercise for all of the other reasons that are in there, okay? So weigh and measure your food, use it, plug it into myfitnesspal. That's the best way that I have found to track your intake, okay? All right, that wraps up the first episode of Ask Macro WOD. I hope you got something out of it. If you have questions, remember, go search on Facebook for Master Your Macros, hashtag Ask Macro WOD. Join the group, and you can ask questions in there. So thanks for watching. Have a good day.